Hello, class. I'm going to get us started on a recorded lecture on the endocrine system. Great stuff. I love this system. It's, although complicated, endocrinologists, there's so many hormones interacting. Certainly, if you ask someone on the street, what's the cardiovascular system, nervous system, skeletal system, they got it. Endocrine, yeah, you ask how many people would know that is, it's going to be a series of glands and tissues that make molecules that are signaling molecules, and we'll call them hormones. That's what it is. And if you think about it, it's just wicked important for your homeostasis, keeps your blood sugar right, your metabolism, your blood calcium levels. Think about hormones, how much they influence your life and puberty, and how it changes you physically, your body, even mentally. You start having, all of a sudden you like sex, things like that, things like how much hormones can change that, right? Testosterone and estrogens. And then you think about the monthly cycles and having to do with ovulation, things like that. Growth hormone, think how important that is as you're growing and you stop growing. Think about adrenaline. We also call it epinephrine, how you feel that adrenaline rush if you almost get in an accident or you're going to fight someone. You feel the effects of your pupils dilating, your heart rate going up. Yeah, and many of you maybe know people with thyroid problems, and those hormones regulate metabolism. So you're cold and lethargic, gain weight, or you're hyper, you can't sleep. And so yeah, hormones clearly have a big influence on your life. And yeah, so I'll lecture, and I'll continue lecturing on the next lecture in person on this great system. All right. Oh, here we go. All right. So an endocrinologist that studies your hormones. You can see in this picture here, taking a look at probably the thyroid gland there. And these glands, the glands we're talking about here are part of the endocrine system. And that means they secrete their hormones, their signaling molecules into your body fluids, into your blood, and your blood carries it around. The other kind of glands, like your salivary glands that make spit, right? Or your sweat glands that make sweat. They produce a product that goes out a duct and it goes somewhere outside your body or in your gut tube. These are glands that secrete hormones, substances that go into your blood, and your blood carries it throughout your body. And that's a way to signal. Just like your nervous system, of course, is a way to signal. My nerve can go to my biceps and say contract. It happens very, very quickly. But there is chemistry there too, isn't there, right? Because at the synapse, it's going to release, remember the neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine, and that's going to bind. So a lot of similarities here. And in your body, there are, I mentioned adrenaline, of course, and you can think about testosterone, estrogens. Think about what hormones come to mind, thyroid hormone, maybe stress and cortisol. These things will all be familiar to you, but think about the hormones that come to mind, the growth hormone. There's how many hormones? 50. Yeah, there's many, many hormones. And what you're going to see is that there's often hormones that cause a gland to release a hormone, and that hormone may go to another gland that causes it to release a hormone. All right. So there's this complicated system and feedback that goes back to regulate this. So that's what I talk about with the complicated part of being an endocrinologist. And this signaling molecule, it goes in your bloodstream and it gets pumped everywhere, to your ears, to your toes, to your fingers, everywhere in your body. And the secret is that only some cells have receptors waiting for that signal. And those will bind to them, and then those cells will do something. They'll make a product, or they won't make a product, or it'll turn them on, or it'll quiet them. So that signal is it's going to be yelled out to your whole body, but only certain cells are waiting for it. They've got the receptors for this particular chemical. Yeah. And so although the hormone may be made far away, it's going to travel in the blood to some other part of your body where it will have the effect. Yeah. And we call those cells that have the receptors the target cells. The hormone is the signal, and there's certain ones that are waiting for it. And so down below here is your typical endocrine gland. We'll start there. And so cells will make a chemical. It's the hormone, and it doesn't matter what the chemical is. It's not doing anything other than acting as a signal. So it's very important that it's the right shape. It's the exact right shape to work. So I'm saying it is important, but it's not like that hormone is going to actually have some kind of function. It's going to work like an enzyme. It's really it's going to cause it to be a signaling molecule. I don't know what this is. This is the weird shape I'm making, but that molecule is going to be released by the hormone cells in some gland, and then it's going to go in the fluid and picked up in the capillaries of the blood, and their heart's going to pump it all over your body. And somewhere far away from the gland is going to be cells that have receptors that have the exact lock that this hormone key is going to fit into, and that cell is going to do something. So this distant gland has signaled to this other part of your body, to cells that are waiting for the signal, and they're going to do something. Yep. Now there's also, we call these paracrine signaling, when there's signals that are given out and it doesn't travel far away in your body, but just to the neighborhood, the cells in the neighborhood. So paracrine, para like paralegal, paraprofessional means kind of beside, is going to be signaling nearby in the neighborhood. It doesn't have to go very far. And there's a weird one called autocrine signaling, autos like self, right? That is where the cell sends out signals that bind to receptors on itself. It's almost like making a sticky note and putting it on yourself, like to remind you. But we'll see this a lot. The immune system, where T cells and cells will be send out signaling molecules to themselves. So autocrine is a molecule that affects yourself, and then paracrine is you send out signals to the neighborhood, and then pure endocrine means the signal is sent far away. Now, the other type of gland, when we talk about endocrine, that's the system, is exo. So endo is in, exo is exit. It's the product is exiting, and it goes out a duct somewhere. And so, as I mentioned in my other examples, you have salivary glands that we'll talk about that make spit, make all this spit, and there's a duct. This big one here goes above your upper molars, and saliva pours out of it when you smell food, or you're eating, right? Or that's chewing tobacco, right? All this fluid will come out. And so it is a product, but it's not going into the bloodstream. It's going into your mouth in this case. And sweat glands I mentioned too. It's a product made in your skin, and that sweat, that salty fluid, is going out a duct that goes to the surface of the skin to cool you down. Yeah. So examples of exocrine glands. And this pancreas here, interestingly, is both, because most of it makes juice with enzymes that get squirted into your gut onto the food as it comes out of your stomach. But in there, we're going to famously study, there's these little islands of endocrine cells, and they're monitoring your blood sugar. And when your blood sugar rises, cells there secrete insulin, right? Yep. And when your blood sugar drops, other cells will secrete glucagon, which is going to raise your blood sugar. So the pancreas is just a famous example. It's both an endocrine and an exocrine gland. Other examples of exocrine glands, we talked about sweat or saliva. The pancreas is making juice. Your gallbladder will make bile, and that'll shoot out into your intestines to help you digest fats. Yeah. All right. So in the gland world, there are exocrine that go out ducts, making a product. But we're going to talk the rest of today and this section on endocrine glands. And they produce a chemical that leaves the cell through exocytosis, leaves the cell, and then it's going to be picked up by the bloodstream, and the veins will return it to the heart, and that'll be pumped throughout the body. Yeah. So an example, my neck is my thyroid gland. It's going to make thyroid hormone, and it's going to just, the cells will release it, and then all the blood vessels will pick it up. It'll go down to my heart, and it'll go out through my body. And every cell with a receptor for this hormone, thyroid hormone, will say, oh, dude, I just got, someone just yelled at me, hollered at me, right? And like, that means they must be telling me to do something, right? And then here's a sweat gland below. Right. Cool. All right, so in your body, signaling molecules, when you think about signals, I think the nervous system first, right? I want to do something. My brain sends out a signal down my nerves, spinal cord, my nerves to do something. And then sensory nerves come back and tell my brain what's going on in my body. And that's true. It's very rapid. Also involve chemicals. And I'll just tell you now, those chemicals that are for signaling, including epinephrine or adrenaline, is given off as a hormone by your adrenal glands, and it's given off by neurons at the synapse as a neurotransmitter. So the same molecule works for both. Yeah. And here I'm taking a look, and I see here's a neuron. It's sending the signal to this muscle. It's going to release a molecule, acetylcholine. And that is going to bind with the receptors on the muscle and cause the muscle to contract. All right. Here's another signaling way, is to make a hormone. Seems slower, doesn't it? Because you got to squirt it out of the gland, and it's got to go to your heart, be pumped to your body, and then it binds to receptors. So yeah, hormones often can be slower processes, long-term. Think about a female's monthly cycles, how long that takes, or growth hormone up to puberty. And our times it's more fast acting. Like think about, you almost get an accident, you feel the adrenaline, you can feel you're breathing faster, and you can feel your heart beating. And so it can happen pretty rapidly too. But generally, you think about hormones for kind of long-term trends. I say that long-term trends. It's also important, like I say, in your homeostasis. So your metabolism, your blood sugar, your calcium levels, all these things, hormones are adjusting that constantly like a thermostat. So, yes. All right. I believe I'll let you watch this animation on your own. Yeah, you guys open up this PowerPoint. It's in bright space, and then it's a good overview of showing a gland, the hormone traveling. So awesome. See that? It'll really, really help you clarify this big picture what the endocrine system is. A really good way of thinking about this too, all right, is the nervous system is like sending a email or a text message. It goes to that one individual, just like a nerve. The anatomy of it, the nerve goes to your particular muscle and tells it, it whispers to it, you baby. All right. The endocrine system is like a Facebook post where you put it out there, everyone reads it, friends, enemies, frenemies, everyone's reading this thing. And maybe only certain people get it, right? It's only meant, when you're vague booking, you're putting something out there that only like your ex is going to read or something like that. So, but everyone has to read it, the whole room. Like if I was in the classroom and I just shouted out to everybody, and really I'm only telling a couple people in the room, but I yell it out, and you all have to hear it. Same thing. Hormones that go out through your blood. It's just the hormones are washing over your whole body. But let's say it's testosterone and you're reaching puberty. The only one that listens to it's like your armpit hair, your groin hair, your acne, things like that it's specifically going towards. Yeah. And like we'll see follicle stimulating hormone. Everyone has to listen to it in your whole damn body because it's traveling the blood, but only in your ovaries and testes it's going to stimulate follicles to make eggs, that kind of thing, are going to listen to it because they have the receptors to it. All right. Nervous system, like direct message. Endocrine system, like a post. Everyone listens to it, but only certain people react. All right. And if you want to just make some generalities, you can talk about the nervous system is very quick and usually brief, contract, muscle. The endocrine system can be longer lasting, if you affect adrenaline, you'll be feeling it, right? 5-10 minutes after, you still feel, those effects. And then, things like monthly hormones. Think about days and weeks that these things are working as you develop an egg and you keep your uterus lining ready in case you get pregnant. So long-term endocrine can be long-term, nervous system usually short in duration and direct. But both, have chemical signals. So the similarities include they both have chemicals that are the signals. Is it a neurotransmitter or is it a hormone, we call it? Yep, beautiful. And you may say to yourself, oh, the nervous system is very specific because that nerve goes to one part of your body to tickle it, right? But you could say the endocrine system is specific too, because the signal only is meant for some cells that have that receptor, see? But the hormone is not released in one little spot. It goes in your blood everywhere, as I mentioned. All right. Beautiful. In lab tomorrow, some of you will be looking at the glands in your little torso thing. So be able to see where in your body these glands, and we're going to talk about specific ones. There's 5 we're going to look at in lab, and I'll talk about those in real detail in my lectures, and then I'll add a few more in lecture. But we're going to see the biggie is your pituitary gland, and that's what I'll talk about today, and that's it. It is called the conductor of the symphony of your hormones in your body, right? But I'm going to give you a secret. Pituitary gland, it's true. It's got a lot of hormones coming out of it. It's found deep in your head. But it really isn't controlled by your brain. Your brain controls it, specifically your hypothalamus. Remember your hypothalamus? Oh, I told you. If you have an answer, it's like the question is, where is your thermostat? Where is the center for thirst? Where is the part that regulates your rhythms? Hypothalamus is a good answer. So really important for your homeostasis, for your electrolytes, your temperature, your keeping your body right. And it turns out your hypothalamus and pituitary, hypothalamus is talking to your pituitary, and it's really kind of in charge. But your pituitary gland, we're going to see, is about the size of a garbanzo bean in your head. But man, it makes 5, 6, 7, 8, bunch of hormones, right? And then we'll talk about your pineal gland. You got a little pine cone shaped gland in there that's involved with your daily, when you wake, when you sleep, that kind of thing. And then another biggie, you guys, very common to have issues with your thyroid gland. It's in your neck right here. And it makes a thyroid hormone, important in development, and especially in you guys and your metabolism of your cells. And embedded in it are these little parathyroid glands you're going to see for blood calcium. Tiny though. We'll mention your thymus. It's important as a child until puberty for activate your T cells. It's important for your immunity. And then down here, your pancreas, I already mentioned. The part we care about in this section is going to be for making insulin, right? Diabetics have a problem. Well, type 1 diabetics have an issue where the pancreas doesn't make insulin, that kind of thing. So you guys, I think all know that. And then on top of your kidneys, not related to your kidney, but on top of it are your adrenal glands, adrenaline. And then also it makes these steroid hormones like cortisol, aldosterone. So super important. And then ovaries and testes, of course, making estrogens and testosterones and important sex hormones like that. Yeah. All right. And I should tell you, to be honest, there's a whole bunch of other hormones made by glands that are more diffuse. So your stomach has cells that make hormones as gastrin. These hormones involved in digestion. And your heart makes hormones that go and affect your kidneys. And so there's diffuse tissues throughout your body that make hormones. These are the biggies, the ones you can see, So these are the big endocrine glands, but other cells make hormones as well in small amounts. All right, when I think endocrine system, I think about homeostasis, regulating your metabolism. Yes, how fast your cells burn sugar, and your water balance, blood pressure, how much fluid you retain in your body, how much you pee out, Definitely. And then I also think, the whole, we talked about testosterone, estrogens, and puberty, the changes that happen. And then the monthly cycles, ovulating, that kind of thing, breast development during pregnancy. So that's what I think about when I think about hormones. Maybe you just think about, oh, I'm hormonal. I feel like, I've got these hormones rushing, and I'm feeling, God, I'm saying like sensitive or something like that, or reproductively kind of stuff with hormones, right? My hormones are raging, and I'm thinking about sex and things like that. So I think hormones that way, and then really regulating your body fluids and electrolytes and your metabolism is the big other part of it there. And then adrenaline, you think about that too. All right. This is a male or female? Oh, you did not expect this question, did you? Well, it's 50-50. Well, I'll tell you. It is a male, and it turns out that here we're talking about signaling molecules that go outside of your body. Hormones are within your own body, signaling yourself. But in the case of these moths, the females are born and they go about their lives, and they produce pheromones, chemicals that go in the air. That's what they do. That's females do. Males, they use this antenna, and they're going to pick up those molecules, and they're going to use the antenna to find that female. So the female don't care. It's doing its thing, right? The male is the one that's going to keep, I smell the hormone and getting closer. It's getting stronger. And so that's why the males have these complex antennae. Actually, lobsters, they also smell with their antenna. They've got little receptors on there. Yeah. And so here's a word you need to know, pheromones. So it sounds like hormones, but pheromones are chemicals, just like hormones are, but these go outside your body and they influence other individuals of your species. Yeah. Yeah. So you wonder why dogs are sniffing every telephone pole and fire hydrant and each other's butts all the time. They're getting pheromones that are telling them about the other dog's reproductive status, what sex it is, even how related it is. Because these pheromones are often proteins. Remember, proteins are made from DNA. And so, yeah, you have studies looking at voles, maybe even people, where they can smell close relatives and they avoid mating with them for inbreeding issues, So anyway, famously, I hunt deer, you guys know that. And then, yeah, the pheromones are given off. And in reproduction, well, I can't really get into all this, but pheromones are given off too. There's even in the school of fish, if a predator is introduced, the fish will give off alarm signals, and then the other fish will all be quiet and go to the bottom because they've signaled to each other using these pheromones. So the question is, do humans have pheromones? Do we give off chemicals that influence other individuals? And other mammals are big into this. We have a very reduced, it's called this vomeronasal. It's a way of smelling that is really big in horses and cats and dogs, things like that we don't really have. So our sense of smell is certainly diminished. And so pheromones, if they certainly are subtle in human beings, but there is direct evidence, there's scientific evidence that there are chemicals given off, especially in the armpits. Maybe one reason for armpit hair, when I talked about hair last semester, is that they take these chemicals and it's more surface area, so they smell. You're like, wants to smell armpits, right? But in fact, you're giving off signals, chemical signals. And you can see, especially in sexual attraction and mate finding, that pheromones might be important. They're down the list. They would seem like in humans next to vision and hearing, right? It's a sense of smell, but we certainly retain some of that. God, so much more interesting to talk about, but I really can't get into it. But yeah, they will sell, unscrupulous people will use this to try to cash in on people, like, oh, buy human pheromones, and you can attract, your lover, things like that. But again, that's very little evidence that stuff works. All right, but pheromones really big in the animal world. especially mammals and insects, with signaling molecules that go outside their body to influence others. Our hormones are just influence us. All right, so hormones are released from the endocrine cells, and they're going to be picked up by the bloodstream, and the heart is going to pump the blood throughout your body, and those signaling molecules may be made here in your throat, will eventually reach your toes, your fingertips, your nose, everywhere, because the blood will carry it, right? Chemistry-wise, really the important thing is there's just two classes of molecules of hormones. There are the steroids, which are fats, lipids, steroid hormones. And then most of them are non-steroid hormones, which are going to be proteins, or really just amino acids or peptides, like small pieces of proteins. So these are the two big classes. And I'm going to talk about how they differ. Their action differs too. All right. The steroid hormones are fatty. I guess I'm going to get to them, but the ones you should think about are your estrogen and testosterone, sex hormones, and then your adrenal cortex hormones, like cortisol, are also steroid hormones. Okay, they're fatty based on fats. And then all the rest are going to be, it shows here, yeah, proteins, peptides, which are pieces of small proteins. And then you can add a sugar on there too, if you want. As some examples, you can see the top one here is a steroid. You can see the base is cholesterol. It's going to have carbons, hydrogen, oxygens on it. The base is cholesterol, and then from that you get steroid hormones. And the big deal, I'll tell you the answer here, is that steroid hormones are fatty, and so they can go right through the cell membrane. All right. The other ones can't get through, so they signal on the surface of the cell. But the steroid ones go right through. They can go through. All right. Cool. Looking at some of these, I can see here's oxytocin. You can see that's just small. It has a few amino acids, so it's small. But here, parathyroid hormone, all these amino acids. That's a legit protein. That's a big one, right? But you can see things like adrenaline. And, hey, here it is. Here is an amine, meaning it's just very small molecule made with one from an amino acid, tyrosine, actually. Yeah. And then we'll talk, I have one slide on prostaglandins. You can see it's clearly fatty. See this long fatty chain? Okay. Cool. And so you can see your adrenaline. Again, when I say adrenaline, epinephrine, same thing. So I may use either. I'm going to use either. I won't tell you that again. So adrenaline is just a really small, and then peptides, you can see, you don't know what these are yet, right? But this is a whole bunch of hormones. Yep. Some are bigger, that proteins. These ones, you throw in a sugar on it. And then these steroid hormones come from a basis of cholesterol, and they're fatty. All right. Here is a list. You guys want to start studying, you want to do well, you're like, this semester, I'm getting that A. All right. One thing you should do is make flashcards or put this up on your refrigerator, because what you need to do, and I'm going to ask you for the practical and for lecture, are what are the glands, what hormones come from them, what do they do? That's it. You got those down. You got a whole bunch of answers to on the test. All right. So I feel like Parmalee, that's a lot of them. Well, okay, yeah, it is. But hormones, they have abbreviations. So you can see this middle column, abbreviations. And that's what we use in the business, right? All right. So you'll see adrenocorticotropic, ACTH, I like that. FSH is follicle stimulating. GH is growth hormone. So yeah, makes sense, easier to talk about. Yeah, and what else when I take a look at this? I see this whole bunch on the hypothalamus. Yeah. These, importantly, they're just all releasing hormones. So yeah, just know that they're releasing hormones. But then let's take a look at the pituitary gland. Woo! That's like half of them, right? I told you it was important. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different hormones coming out of this anterior lobe, and then 2 hormones coming out of the posterior. So the pituitary gland has 2 lobes. So one has 6 hormones, one has 2. So you need to know what these are, and I'll go through them today and what they do. The next time I'll talk about the thyroid gland, parathyroid, adrenal, and pancreas. All right. Yep. So these hormones, you can see what does ADH do? What does prolactin do? What does growth hormone do? These are things you need to know. You need to know what gland they come from. All right, how do hormones work? We would take a break now. I feel like let's take a break. I can take a drink. It's just sparkling water. So far, you guys have seen what hormones are, the endocrine system generally, what it does. Chemistry, talked about there's fatty ones and then the non-fatty ones, which are protein or amino acids, right? And you know these things travel in your bloodstream. You know there's target cells that have receptors for it. And then we'll see, I'll tell you how it actually binds and what it does. But now we'll see, like, what are the hormones, like, what do they do? I mean, they signal. I talked about signaling. And then I also said they'll turn on a cell or turn off a cell to make something, to have some kind of effect. Yeah. In general, pretty safe to say that they alter metabolic processes. So thyroid hormone hits one of your cells and it gets it going. It says, let's burn some sugar. Let's do some work. Testosterone during puberty hits your armpit. It says, come on, hair follicles, let's start growing. So it's going to alter that cell that it binds to. And it often works by turning on an enzyme. So you're going to have enzymes in your cells that have a safety cap and they're useless. And then the signal will come and take that safety cap off. All of a sudden that enzyme is active and then it starts making something. Let's say your blood sugar is too high. The cells in your pancreas, sugar is going to react to cells in your pancreas. It's going to release insulin. Now, insulin in your blood is going to bind to insulin receptors, let's say like on a liver cell. Insulin receptor is going to say, oh, we're going to start pumping in glucose out of the blood into the cell, and then we're going to store that sugar as glycogen. We're going to store it, getting sugar out of the blood, lowering your blood sugar. So that insulin was the molecule that bound the receptor. It's going to change that liver cell, that muscle cell, so that it starts pumping more sugar out of the blood and storing it, thus lowering your blood sugar. That's an example of what a hormone does. And it is dose dependent. You know, you get a little bit of adrenaline, you know, your heart raises a little bit. A lot of adrenaline, your heart starts racing, your pupils are big and your mouth goes dry and your breathing goes up, right? So blood sugar rushes, gets higher. So it depends on how many receptors are bound on how big an influence it is, as you'd expect. And what's interesting here is that your body can regulate and it can adjust. So that if you have like let's say one of your glands is failing and you're making less and less thyroid hormone. Well, your cells realize there's so little of it. So they upregulate, they make more receptors to try to get to it. And let's say you have way too much like stress hormone, cortisol, too much of it, your cells will downregulate and they'll start making less receptors so that it doesn't have such a huge effect. So your body will up and down regulate if there is some situation where there's too much or too little hormone going on. All right. That's also, as I mentioned, the hallmark of addiction too. All right. In your body, remember you made those endorphins that make you feel good. And if you shoot a bunch of cocaine or something like heroin, like I know a lot about drugs, you're shooting cocaine, I don't know what that means, but you're taking a lot of drugs, you're taking a lot of pills and, you know, too much morphine, you know, like then your body, the receptors in your brain make less and less receptors. And so it takes more of the drug to make you feel good. And if you cut out the drug, you feel like crap because your body stops making it. And then, so you need to, it takes, go through rehab to get the receptors to be at a good level. Like, all right, so this hormone, it does its job in your body and it doesn't last forever. You know, you don't secrete adrenaline the rest of your life. Your heart is racing, right? It's broken down and you pee it out, you know, eventually you get rid of it. So let's take a look. So the hormone is made and we're going to see this hormone, you want to get really into it. It travels in your bloodstream. Sometimes it's bound to a carrier and sometimes it's free. Talking pharmacologically, this is important, is how much free hormone do you have versus bound. And that when it's bound, I mean, it can release too, but only the free one can do something. Because it has to be by itself. It can't be like on a big, huge mothership, right? So the free one can bind. And when you make a hormone, eventually it just gets broken down. Your liver, your kidneys will break down the hormone, and then you'll, like I say, pee it out or get rid of it, right? And so most of the hormones you make, that's what happens to it. It doesn't find a target, it gets broken down and it's gotten rid of. And then some of it will do its effect, right? But only lasts so long. There's a half-life. Like, how long does it last, the hormone? Yeah, and any of the hormone that hits a receptor is going to make the effect. It's going to do something. But a lot of it just gets broken down, right? Yeah, cool. So you make this hormone. Remember, there's like 50 different kinds of hormones, and they have their influence, but eventually your body breaks them down. It gets ready for the next time it needs it. Yeah, we're going to see some need to be changed, to be activated, or they have to lose their carrier molecules. Yeah. This kind of shows it. This here is on a cell, and this is a receptor for a hormone. Just diagrammatic. It's a protein, and it has a active site. See that little thing? That's going to be waiting for a hormone. And the hormone is this molecule that's going to fit right in that receptor. And all of a sudden, this weird shaped little protein, once it gets that hormone attached to it, it's going to change shape. Remember, proteins, their shape is so important, and it's going to activate it. It's going to make it into a different configuration, a different shape, because it has something bound to it. It's going to change shape. And normally what happens is that it's going to wake up an enzyme, make an enzyme active, and it's going to maybe wake up another enzyme. And it's often a chain, right? We did metabolism. I talked about there's a whole cascade of effects that happen. And eventually what's going to happen is that it's going to turn on an enzyme that's going to actually do something. It's going to, like vitamin D kind of works as a hormone. It's going to make in your gut, it's going to cause it to make more receptors to absorb calcium out of your diet, that kind of thing. Or insulin is going to cause a cell to turn on the pumps, to take sugar out of your blood. So this signaling molecule eventually is going to turn on an enzyme here. And we'll see, yeah, it can directly affect the cell shape. It's kind of rare. And then we're going to see those steroid hormones, that signal is actually going to come in, and it's going to cause you to turn on genes to actually make something. Yeah. Now let's get right to it. Steroid hormones, guess what? The cell membrane is made out of fats. Fats dissolve in fats. It actually makes them hard to carry in the bloodstream because fats, oil and water don't mix, but they usually have a carrier molecule on them. And then once they're here, they can get right through because they're fats. Fats go through fats. And if you're like a charged molecule, you can't go through there because they got that fatty wall. All right. So a steroid hormone, testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, is going to go right through the membrane. It's not going to stop, talk to anyone at the door, right in there. Not only that, it's going to go right into the boss's office. It's going to go right into the nucleus. It could go into the cytoplasm and bind with another molecule, or it could go right into the nucleus and then bind with usually a couple molecules. And then the steroid hormone, along with these receptor molecules, this complex now, the hormone, steroid hormone, and the receptor molecules, that's going to work to glom onto your DNA to start transcription of a gene. It's going to wake up a gene, and it's going to cause that gene to be read, and you're going to make copies of the messenger RNA, which are going to go out into the cell cytoplasm. They're going to find a ribosome. They're going to start making proteins, making a product. So the steroid hormone went right into the cell, into the nucleus even. It's going to bind to some other molecules that are waiting there for it. And that's going to glom onto a gene, the beginning of a gene, and it's going to cause it to be read. And it's going to be making copies and copies and copies of the messenger RNA. What happens to that? That messenger RNA is the recipe to make proteins. You're going to start making stuff. Yeah. And so that's how a steroid hormone works. Cool, huh? It goes right in there and it causes gene transcription. the effect of that hormone is going to cause your cell to make messenger RNA to make proteins. Yeah. All right. So here you can see when you look at a steroid hormone, it looks very similar, doesn't it? They've all got this backbone of cholesterol, is what you start with. And if you notice here, this is estrogen and testosterone. They're wicked similar. They're just slightly different. Makes all the difference there. Yeah. And these top two come from your adrenal cortex. These are adrenal hormones, steroid hormones. Yeah. Cool. And one thing about all of these, because they're fatty, they don't dissolve in the plasma of your blood, the water very well, right? Oil and water don't mix. So they often have a transport or carrier protein that is dissolved in water, and that's going to carry it around. And when it gets to the cell, it's going to lose that passenger and it can do its thing. All right, steroid hormones directly on the genes to make transcription happen, to wake them up. Yeah, this is also your thyroid hormone. It also does not dissolve in water, as an aside, and so it needs a carrier molecule too. Okay. All right, the other side of the non-steroid hormones, these are most of them. So they can't go in through the cell membrane because it's fatty and they're not fatty. And so they don't mix. And so they are going to bind onto a protein on the surface of the cell that has that receptor. And again, only the cells that are going to listen to this signal are going to have these receptors. So testosterone goes by your spleen cell, doesn't do anything. It hits that armpit cell to make hair. It's like, oh, time to make hair. But all the other cells, billions of cells, ignore it because they don't have a receptor for it. Okay. So when they have that receptor, it's going to bind with it. Seems a little complicated. There's going to be a couple steps here I want you to know. So the hormone binds to the receptor on the surface of the cell. It's a protein. And it is going to activate that protein. It's called a G protein. And if you guys go on to other cell biology classes and things like that, you will get into this more. But this G protein is going to cause it to change shape, and it's going to wake up an enzyme called adenylate cyclase. All right. Adenylate cyclase is going to take ATP, right? That's your energy. It's going to ATP, and it's going to make CAMP out of it. All right. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate, has 3 phosphates on it. Monophosphate is only going to have 1, so it's going to lose 2 of those phosphates, and it's going to be cyclic. It's going to connect to itself like that. So this is the deal. The hormone attaches to the G protein. It's going to wake up the adenylate cyclase, this other enzyme, and that's going to make CAMP. Now, CAMP is what's going to make it's going to make the changes down the next levels. The CAMP is going to cause you to activate other enzymes. And you'll see protein kinase. Whenever you see a kinase, it means it's going to take, it's going to phosphorylate. So it's going to put a phosphorus on it to make it excited or charged, or it's going to get it active again. So the hormone started it all. And eventually the CAMP is going to have the existing proteins are going to put a phosphate on it and wake them up. And maybe there's one going to wake up. Maybe that's it. But usually there's like another one. And it's like another one. And eventually you're going to have, it woke up this protein, this enzyme is going to start doing something in the cell. So the original molecule, you can see you have the primary messenger is that original message, but then you have secondary messengers inside of it. All right. And so it could be a couple of them. And so eventually, let's say you've turned on a protein to make insulin in your pancreas cell. It's going to make it. Remember, this is already there the whole time, this protein, this enzyme, but it wasn't turned on yet. CAMP turns it on, and then it's all excited. So CAMP turns on the protein, and then it starts making insulin, and it comes out of your cell, it goes in your blood and does its thing. All right. So there's a couple layers here, a couple things for you guys to memorize, I know. But the non-steroid hormone is going to be carried in the blood to a target cell. It's going to combine activating one of these G proteins. And that is going to make an enzyme we need to know called adenylate cyclase, which is going to make ATP into CAMP. And CAMP is going to activate proteins that are going to then have the effect in the cell. these protein kinases. Yep. Substrates would be like things that you're changing. So the enzyme is going to work on that. And that's going to have the effect of the hormone. So a huge difference here, isn't there? This one just went in and caused gene transcription, steroids. Non-steroids stop at the front office, at the wall, and they bind to a protein, and that is going to start this cascade where you make CAMP, and the CAMP is going to go and excite other things. Yeah, as long as you have CAMP, that cell is going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do my thing. So you see second messengers. CAMP is a second messenger. The first messenger came to the cell. And here we're looking at CAMP. So here's ATP. You guys are all familiar with that. Usually you get the energy, breaking that last phosphate off, you get ADP. But in this case, you can also break it here, and then it's going to stick to itself. And that's CAMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Yep. And this CAMP is what keeps it excited, keeps it working. And then you need to break that down. Like if you have CAMP constantly, your cells are constantly excited and doing a thing, right? And so there's something called phosphodiesterase. Phosphodiesterase is going to break down CAMP. Brings it over here, then you add a couple more phosphates and you're back to ATP. So I add another layer here for you. Phosphodiesterase is going to break down CAMP, and it will make the cell, it will stop this cycle. And that helps explain what caffeine does. Why does caffeine keep you, you're kind of excited, your heart rate's up, things like that? Well, adrenaline, epinephrine, we're going to see is your fight or flight molecule. It's going to make your breathing fast, your heart rate fast. It's going to get you ready to fight or run away. All right. Now, caffeine, turns out, inhibits that phosphodiesterase. And the phosphodiesterase is what breaks down CAMP and makes you relax again. And so when you have caffeine, it keeps the CAMP there longer. I mean, it gets rid of eventually, but caffeine is going to cause this a longer effect of adrenaline. Cool. All right, people. Yeah, again, hormones, just signaling molecules. And it turns out, how can a hormone like adrenaline have such different effects? Like if you think, oh, what it does one thing, right? It makes your heart go faster. It makes your pupils get big, your mouth go dry, your blood sugar go up, your muscles in your breathing tubes relax so you can breathe deeper. It has all these different effects. Okay. Because, like I said, I don't care what that molecule, what about it itself, it's just a signal. And so different cells can have different receptors and they can behave differently to that same signal. So I just want to get you away from thinking, a certain molecule has a certain effect. Certain molecules can have different effects in your body. And then most of your body ignores it, right? It only has effects on certain cells that have the receptors for it. Yep. So here is adrenaline. And we'll get to this in my chapter, but you'll see it does all these different effects, speeding up your heart. It's going to make your blood sugar goes up. It does it through a whole bunch of different ways. The common denominator is it's the same signaling molecule, but the cells only certain cells react to it, and they react differently. Yeah. And aldosterone, we think it only works in the kidneys. We're going to see it makes you retain water, which is going to make your blood pressure go up. But then looking more closely, when we look at receptors, it's found that, oh God, there's some on your brain and your heart. And so we realize it's very complex. I just want to put that out there, that this is all a complex system all around, that these molecules, we think, aldosterone is just, oh, it works on your kidneys, but it has other secondary effects that make it more complicated. All right. I've already told you this. I guess big picture, this is the first class, is that you guys know that every cell in your body has every gene to make anything, to do anything, right? That has a nucleus. Red blood cells don't have DNA, but all the other cells do. And the key is is that in different cells have different genes that are packed in storage and genes that are active, right? And so in the case of certain cells that react to a hormone, they've got genes that are making receptors for that particular hormone. So they're waiting for it. The hormones wash over 99% of the cells, but the ones that have receptors for it, they are turned on. They're going to do something. Yep. All right. Guys, hopefully this is useful. You guys have the ability to pause me, ability to turn me off, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go ahead. We're going to continue a little more. I think I'm feeling like actually, yeah, I got some time. I think I will go to prostaglandins, just introduce the pituitary, but then I'll save the rest for in person. All right. I'll mention prostaglandins now. They are paracrine substances, means that they are hormones, they're fatty hormones that are secreted by cells. They don't store them immediately, but immediately they're secreted and they affect cells in the neighborhood. And they can either, they can either they modify the cells so that they are modulated. They have different influences of hormones. So a hormone may come and the cell that already has prostaglandins will behave differently than one that doesn't. So it's just like one more fine tuning thing are these prostaglandins. And they're real important. They look at them for inflammation and pain. It turns out that aspirin is going to acetylsalicylic acid, aspirin is going to inhibit prostaglandins. Yeah, pharmacy world, there's an interesting, prostaglandins are made from arachidonic acid. And so it influences that. So you don't make prostaglandins, you don't have that pain. But I guess what I want you to know, and this, we're not just going to move on one slide, is that prostaglandins are fatty. They are produced on demand through many places in your body. Aspirin is going to tamp them down, but their influences in inflammation and pain because they influence the cell's reaction, how it reacts. All right. Yeah, we'll get into this a little bit, but when you think about hormones and you think about steroids, first thing I think about is anabolic steroids and their abuse in athletics, things like that. So it's true. We'll talk about that, how steroids, we can hijack the body's natural steroids, but it has all kinds of bad influences as well. And growth hormone, also used often in combination with anabolic steroids, is abused by people because it will help make more lean muscle, less fat. Steroids as well are going to make muscle cells get bigger. It's true. Bad issues with it. And then one hormone here we're going to talk about is erythropoietin. And that is what's the hormone that's going to make you make more red blood cells. And so the next chapter, we'll talk about blood doping. And so if you have more red blood cells, you're able to have more aerobic capacity. You can run longer, you can cycle longer, you can swim longer because you have more red blood cells going to carry more oxygen. But the problem is you get too many red blood cells, your heart's got to pump this like maple syrup and it causes heart attacks and death and some bad things too. But there is a point where erythropoietin is going to help an athlete because it's going to increase their red blood cell production. Now we'll talk about that. All right. So hormones can be abused. And these are the three that are typically done in athletics. Some steroid hormones, growth hormone, and erythropoietin. All right. Hormonal secretions. When do you secrete them? Like why at puberty you start making testosterone and estrogens and start changing, your body start changing, things like that. What controls you making insulin? Your blood sugar. Blood sugar does. All right. Okay. So there's controls. And so you imagine you have too high blood sugar, you secrete insulin, it brings your blood sugar down, but you better stop with the insulin, it's going to go too low, right? And so then you stop making insulin. And so the control has to be beautiful. And it's mostly negative feedback, right? Just we talk about our temperature. We get too hot, we start cooling it down, right? Positive feedback is when we're in the same direction, like childbirth, or when your contractions are strong, make them stronger, but there's going to be birth, all right? So negative feedback is going to keep these hormones at the right levels they should be at. Talk about half-life, talking about how much time does it take for half the hormone to be degraded. So hormones are broken down and they're peed out, right? And when you look at a hormone level, if you're going to study a person, if they have a hormonal issue, you go to an endocrinologist, they're going to take most important diagnostic tool is a blood sample, and they can look at levels of all these hormones. And our hormone levels are never static. They're always, they're coming around a mean like this. So that's the negative feedback. So you keep it right. Insulin after a meal is going to spike. It's going to go down. Fasting between meals, things like that. Thyroid hormone, it's going to go up when you want metabolism to go up. And if you kept going up, your metabolism would go so fast, you guys would burn all this sugar and wouldn't be able to sleep, things like that. So it comes back down. Yep. So hormones are always found around a level that we've determined, that it should be at. And that changes depending on your sex, your age, things like that. But there's going to be a certain level, and the hormones are going to be around that level. Yeah. And this negative feedback, I already mentioned it, talking about high blood sugar, you secrete insulin, brings the blood sugar down. And interesting to look at these 3 examples here. And we're getting really into it now. Like the pituitary gland is going to secrete a bunch of hormones, like thyroid stimulating hormone. It's going to tickle your thyroid, make it stimulated. Well, I told you the pituitary gland, you think it's the boss, but it really listens to your brain, the hypothalamus. So really the hypothalamus is going to secrete a releasing hormone that's going to make the front part of your pituitary gland release thyroid stimulating hormone, which is going to stimulate your thyroid hormone to make your thyroid gland to make thyroid hormone. And that's going to travel to the cells of your body and increase your metabolism. I know, I told you, complicated. Now, where's the feedback here? Well, the feedback is once you make a lot of the thyroid hormone, it's going to have a negative feedback. It could go back to pituitary saying, dude, we got enough, slow down, or even back to the hypothalamus, say stop sending releasing hormone so that your pituitary stops sending the stimulating hormone, so your thyroid stops making your thyroid hormone. Wish I could see your faces. All right. So there's a negative feedback at a couple different levels here. Your thyroid hormone gets too high, you got to slow it down. And so it says, hey, dude, we got enough. It's going to go back and tell it to do that. Yeah. Interestingly, I'll mention it now. Imagine you have too much thyroid hormone. Imagine that you're hot and you're jittery and what could be the problem? Well, it could be that your pituitary gland has a tumor. It's making too much thyroid releasing hormone. And it's your poor thyroid gland sitting there like, hey, it's telling me to make some. I'm just doing my job. Or it could be your thyroid gland. It's gone rogue. No more stimulating hormone. It's just like, I want to make more thyroid hormone. It's a tumor on it. And then you have too much. Or it could be a tumor in your brain. Your brain could be making too much of the hormone that tells your pituitary to release the stimulating hormone. All right, so I'm giving you a little taste here of how the feedback controls these levels and how it could be at several levels. I'll tell you one more thing. You could have a tumor in your lung that's producing thyroid hormone. How about that? Cool, huh? This is real too. So, so that's what I'm saying. An endocrinologist sees too much thyroid hormone. There's questions that need to be asked. You need to look at other levels. You need to see what's going on. Cool. All right, here's something we'll get to too. Here's just a little preview, but in the case of your adrenal glands secreting adrenaline, we're going to see it's actually a nerve goes right to your adrenal glands. Sympathetic nerve goes right there, and that's going to tell it to release adrenaline to the bloodstream. And so in this case, the effects of adrenaline go back and say, nerves, stop tickling the adrenal gland. Okay, that's going to bring it down. All right. And then lastly, look at the control. The example here is in your pancreas. You have cells there that look at blood sugar. And when you guys eat a bunch of sugar, the cells there, the blood goes through it every day constantly. It's going to realize there's too much blood sugar. It's going to release insulin. And insulin is going to go throughout your body. It's going to tell your body to store sugar, get it out of the blood, store it. We'll use it later. And so here, you can see that the pancreas is looking at the levels of sugar in your blood, and it's going to make insulin, which is going to make cells in your muscles and your liver store sugar. And so this is going to come back. Once you have the sugar goes down, it's going to cause the gland to make less insulin. All right, negative feedback. 1, 2, 3. All right, hopefully get a little taste of this, and then we'll talk more about this, but this is the kind of the feedback we're looking at here. All right, and I think I'm going to go ahead and I got time. This is a lot here. I recognizing it, getting right back into it, aren't I? But we'll talk about this little gland here, your pituitary, deep in your brain. Let me ask you guys how good you are. What bone and what structure of the bone did we learn last semester where the pituitary gland sits? I know, I could call on some of you and you know it. Others, maybe not. Maybe you don't all know it. All right, I got you. But I know some of you know that is in the sella turcica of your sphenoid bone. Great stuff. So I'll start in person looking at his pituitary gland. Take a look at it. Deep, deep, deep in your head. Hard to get to. You're like, why do you have to get to it? Well, there could be a tumor. You could need to do surgery on it. And you don't want to go through your brain. You go like through your nose. And it's right in there. So, all right, class. I didn't even time how long this is, but that's a solid lecture now. You guys have got all the introduction to the endocrine system. And so in person, I'm going to start with the pituitary gland, and I'll get to the thyroid, your adrenal glands, and then I'll see you in lab, actually. Yeah, I'll see you all in lab before I see you again in lecture. And so I'll talk to you guys again. I'll do a quick little overview of the glands we'll look at. And in lab, I'm going to ask you, we're going to look at the different glands, 5 different glands, be able to identify what they look like histologically, and then know the hormones and what they do. So your assignment now is to study the glands, the hormones that come out of it, and what they do. And even if you don't do anything before lab, in lab, you can look them up, at least, start the process. But if you want to get ahead, start learning the glands, the hormones, and what they do, because that's a big part of this chapter. All right, you guys, it sounds COVID-y times here, but it's snow day times. And I really look forward to seeing you guys. So remember, get on the CurCloud, do the diabetes labs always done, and then bring your laptop, computer with CurCloud ready to go. You've already activated it, and we'll do that. All right.